Mr. Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu, Shri Shyam Mohan, and all the dignitaries on the dais, and also all of you who are attending this very important launch of the Forum for Democracy and Global Peace, also the voice of the masses. Let me begin by saying, when we talk of democracy, the normal meaning is, it is the people, power is in people's hands. But is that the position now, is the first question we have to ask. I don't think people's power is in people's hands. People's power is in someone else's hands. This is the first thing that we should also actually look at it. When we say democracy, there are so many different types of democracies. A guided democracy, a goaded democracy, a dictator democracy. There are different types of democracies. So we have to be very clear, what type of a democracy do we really need and do we really want? This is one very important thing which we need to look at. The second thing is, it is said of the people, for the people, by the... But people now feel it is very far away from all of this. Because what is happening is, there is a lot of difference and a gap between what is the principle and what is the practice. There is a big gap between the principle and the practice. So how do we bridge that gap becomes very, very important for us. This is one thing which I think we need to actually look at. There are a lot of rights and duties prescribed. There is more emphasis on rights and less emphasis on the duties. So we need to actually look at it. How do we find a big balance between rights and duties? How many people really go and vote at the elections? Just ask one simple question. So we need to actually look at what is it that is ailing democracy and how can we actually. We thought elections and the electoral process will ensure that the will of the people is known. But when very few people attend and very few people vote, and even those votes are actually purchased, then how do we know that democracy is functioning very well? So who has to therefore restore democracy to its original glory? It has to be the people themselves. So someone needs to educate the people, enlighten the people as to what is required. Therefore, the function of the Forum for Democracy therefore assumes importance, and also for global peace. We have recently had G20, and the African Union for the first time has been there. What does it signify? The United Nations organizations have not really done their work well. Big portion of humanity is left out. Then how do you say that it is functioning very well? So you just say United Nations Security Council. India is the second largest first democracy and the second largest population, and we are not represented. How do we say that democracy is functioning well? These are questions that any intelligent person should ask of himself or herself. Second thing is, all democracy has to be done through a process of dialogue, debate, deliberation, discussion and decision. Is it being done like this? Decisions are taken by individuals. It is not being taken through a democratic forum. So this is one very important thing we need to also actually look at it. Second, we thought Panchayati Raj, once Panchayati Raj is introduced, people at local level also can exercise their franchise. Is it happening? No. What is happening to Panchayat Raj? Everyone said, and after some committees were set up, they said 3 F's are very important. One, they said that you must have the functions properly delegated from higher authorities to the Panchayat. The functions were never delegated. Next, they said funds must be released. Funds were not released. Then they said that we must actually have the functionaries also in place. They were not put in place. And lastly, there is no focus at all. So basic thing I would think is, we need to focus on what are our priorities and attend to those priorities in the manner in which we ought to be actually attending to them, which I think has not really happened. And second, what is happening in the country today? We are having a situation where corruption is widespread. Very, very widespread. Communalism, widespread. Casteism, widespread. Criminalization of politics and politicization of criminals. This is also happening. So we need to actually look at which are the main things that we need to attend to. I remember in the north of India, there is a saying, whenever we talk of corruption, people used to say, sir, corruption happens because of Neta, Dada, Lala, Baba, Jola, Bibi, Hafta and Mamul. You see how many people are involved. And now these are all forming part of society. If each one of them does not actually correspond to what he is expected to do, then how can we expect anything more beneficial to the people? So therefore, these are the issues that the people must have before them as part of their program, and unless we tackle these problems, I do not think the democracy that we want can really function in the country. This is something which we need to actually ponder over on. Second, there are a lot of inequalities and disparities and lack of opportunities. And we talked of citizens' charters. But have we actually given any citizens' charters? Are we implementing these citizens' charters? This has not been done. And then there is a very, very important concept in administration. That is, administration is different from governance. Governance means that you are like a captain of a ship. What is the duty of the captain of a ship? He has to row it safely to the port, and he has to look after the passengers on the ship. But what is happening now? That is not at all happening. It is only steering. It is only actually attempting to show that you are doing some work by actually rowing the boat, not steering it to the destination. So this is one very important thing. And all governance, very simple. Smart governance, they say. What is smart governance? Simple, moral, accountable, responsible, transparent. Are we having these qualities in the government anywhere? This is a question we need to pose to ourselves. Also at the same time, we say the people who are in governance are more important than what is governed. So who are the people? I just now related to you some people like Neta, Dada, Lala, all those things. Now what is happening? You need actually, this is not my wording, this in UK, there was a Lord Nolan committee and Acton committee. Those committees came at what are the qualities that our leaders must have, whether it is in government, whether it is in actually politics, or whether it is in the legislatures. They said people must be, first quality they said, selflessness. Selflessness is the first quality. Honesty, accountability, integrity, leadership, objectivity, openness. Unless all these qualities are there, only then can we expect leaders to discharge their duties properly. So whether that is happening or not. In India today, what is happening? There is no social safety net. People have to run around for anything that they want. It is not as if they are getting what they deserve and what they need and what they require. That is not really happening. And justice has been slow, has been halting. Luckily, they have not really tampered it as much as they would like to do. But I think attempts continue to be made for that thing also. And second, we have said right to information, right to education, right to employment, right to health. But are these rights really enforceable? Is it being done or it is not being done? This is a point I think we need to actually find out. And therefore, a forum is something which can actually call attention to these issues. And in a series of symposia, they could actually pose these problems and find out what is the consensus and what is the way forward. These are things which we need to actually look at. And second, not only India, in many countries, this problem is going to come. One is security, internal security, external security. As India is finding, we have problems with internal security, problem with external security, whether it is China, whether it is Pakistan, whether it's Myanmar, or whether it is smuggling. All these things are happening around us. So one is security. Second, food security, water security, energy security. All these three are interlinked. Food, water, energy. Also ecology and climate change is happening. So how do we actually comes very? And more importantly, in India, the divides are very large number of divides. Rich, poor, educated, employed, gender divide. And also whether there is actually any attempts being made to bridge those divides. That bridging of the divides is very, very important. You can't eliminate the divide, but you can at least bridge the divide, and you can narrow down whatever differences are there. Are we actually able to do this thing is the next question that we have to ask ourselves. And in government, let me also say, in government, we used to always think, whenever there was talk of administrative reforms, we used to think like this. In government, it functions like this. Form, that means the structure. Inform, information, up and down, it goes up. Files also go up and down. Whether decisions are taken is a different issue. But this goes up and down. Form, inform, conform. You do what you are asked to do. Don't ask questions. You understand? This is how government functions. Form, inform, conform. But today what is required to come? Not conform, but transform. Transform, not enough. If you don't transform adequately, then you have to reform the government. Get new people to run the government. So that is where the elections come in. That is how we need to actually. And more than that is perform. Ultimately, what is the test? Performance. But is anyone actually performing properly, and anyone evaluating that performance and placing it before the public so that they can actually say whether it's being done properly or not being done? Second, what do we have? If different political parties come, center-state relationships is one problem. And we also find that everywhere the question is employment. What happened earlier? We used to say, Roti, Kapda, Makan. Then from there it went to a next higher stage. Sadak, Pani, Bijli. Now it is Naukri. How do I get a job? You see the number of unemployed people. The public service commissions don't recruit on a regular basis. They wait for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, postpone that, and then actually do it. Is this the way we govern ourselves? Is a question that we need to actually ask ourselves. Also at the same time, there are less number of whistleblowers either within the government or outside the government. So unless we have more number of whistleblowers who can call attention to these issues, only then I think there is some way. And what is the role in such a matter that the forum can play is something I would request the forum people to see how we can focus attention on these issues so that government also are actually well advised. Second question. Today, all governments are only for the purpose of votes giving welfare distribution, but no economic growth. We have to actually distinguish between whether economics will provide that or whether these subsidies will provide that. People are looking that subsidies can fetch us votes, therefore let us actually continue these subsidization programs. The next question is the justice, rule of law, is it actually happening or not? And rule of, you see the way, the number of arrests that are being made, whether it is justified or not, it is not for us. But you are finding for no reason at all, the police exercise their power by just arresting anyone, and they are becoming handmaidens of any government that comes into power. So we need to also look at this is one other thing, is it really democracy or it is not democracy? And second thing is, we are actually to look at how does it impact peace? How does it provide a voice to the voiceless? Ultimately, what is important is voice of the masses. The voice of the masses is not heard. The voice of a person who has a powerful voice only is heard. So voice of the masses is something which we need to actually know which voice we have to actually project. Now there is a lot of things in the world today. Interdependence is what is determining how progress will be made on the world scale. So therefore, poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. Poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. So this is something which if governments recognize, if political leaders recognize, they can actually do something. Next is a lot more of inclusiveness needs to come into our political system. Also, the failure of United Nations, therefore, how do we recognize the failures and reform so that we are able to do it? Also at the same time, what is happening? Internationally, migrations are taking place. Nationally, also migrations are taking place. Today, you look at Hyderabad. All the construction workers come from Bihar, Bengal, UP, or Madhya Pradesh or Chhattisgarh. You look at all the catering establishments, girls from the northeast are there serving food. See, this is happening everywhere. We are seeing all these phenomena. And therefore, what does it mean? People here either have so much money they can't do these menial jobs, or that they don't want to do this work and they all want to be babus. So this is also another thing we need to actually look at the migration. And there are many flare points. You are seeing how many flare, anything can lead to a conflagration. So we need to actually look at that. And more importantly, supply chain. Suddenly tomato prices will go up. Suddenly onion prices will go up. Suddenly potato prices will go up. What is happening to our supply chains? Internal supply chains and external supply chain. I can understand external supply chains. There can be other things. But at least internal supply chain, is it not a function of the civil supplies? This is something we need to actually question. And therefore, there are some things where I know that a forum cannot tackle all this, but let them actually pick up 2 or 3 pressing things and try to find out one thing. And the next thing is infrastructural development is very important. And that actually, today what is happening, the G20 recommended multi-developmental banks should come in. So if they come in, maybe more funding will be available. What it means is the people who have must transfer their money. And then only we can actually do this one. Whereas in India, we have always felt Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That is correct. But how to bring that into practice? And Ano Badra Kritavo Yantu Vishwataha. Let noble thoughts come to us from all parts of the world. So let us actually, the forum also must see how they can actually rope in what has been the best practices available elsewhere and how can they actually get it. Next is, today, hatred or war, both things start in the minds of people. And the bulwarks against it must be built in the minds of the people. So how do we bring about this mindset change also becomes very important to us. Second, many people don't recognize the independence and the interdependence between nations. And today, freedom of the seas, resources of the sea. Today, we are almost exhausting the resources on land. In the next 20 years, we will have to look at the sea. Algae may provide us food. Ultimately, it is the sea that is going to help us and salvage us. So this is one thing where the freedom of the seas becomes very important. Also at the same time, green earth. And one simple formula, waste not, want not. When we were small children, we were told, waste not, want not. I think the same principle must apply everywhere. And one thing is the right to live, the right to learn also. And bridge the income divide. Bridge the income divide. Some people get enormous astronomical figures, whereas some people have to just find out where is the money for the next meal. Is this democratic? We have to ask ourselves that question. And all prosperity is dependent on whether conditions of peace exist so that people can freely think of what other things they have to do. And coming to the voice of the masses, we need to actually look at I read a book by Swami Vivekananda which said, I am a voice without a form. I don't have a form, but I am a voice. It says the voice is very important. I don't need a form. But that voice must be shrill, the voice must be heard, and that should not be muted. Now what happens? Those voices are muted. So that should not actually happen. And therefore, we need to actually look at how we can make that shrill voice not a voice in the wilderness. Not a voice in the wilderness. It is said in ancient India, the prescription was, Shruti means the Veda. Veda is like our constitution of India. Shruti, Smriti, whatever is remembered, whatever can be recalled. Smriti, Sadachara, good conduct, good usage, good practice. This is called Sadachara. And lastly is Swasyacha Priyam Atmanaha. What does the shrill voice of my conscience tell me? Which is right, which is wrong? Whatever laws may be there, ultimately it is the shrill voice of your conscience that actually tells you what should be done. And therefore, one very important from this will be a social safety net is required for all people who are downtrodden, who can't have a reasonable life, who can't have a living for themselves. This is one thing very. And ultimately, the forum can do a really good job, protect democracy in the ideal manner, if only they can actually ensure that their discussions concentrate on taking care of those who cannot take care of themselves. Taking care of those who cannot take care of themselves, and also who can actually bring in a little better of good governance, and who can actually do something which will be beneficial and which will be long lasting. And lastly, I would say, we have to all remember, life is to live, life is to love, life is to laugh, life is to earn, and life is to give, and life is to lead, and life is to leave a legacy behind you. I hope that forum will also leave such a legacy behind its formation. Thank you very much.